Comptroller Kubel, when we start the public hearing, can you begin with a brief overview of the budget so far, and then we can public hearing? Okay. Okay, at 5:30 on Monday, July 10th. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here for the July Budget Committee meeting. We're starting this meeting with a public hearing on the budget for the city of Kankakee for the fiscal year that begins May 1st of this year and goes through April 30th of next year, 2024. So we will begin that public hearing now. To begin the process, Comptroller Kubel is going to provide a brief overview of the budget so the public is aware of where things stand at the moment, and then there'll be the opportunity for public comment on the budget. So Comptroller Kubel, take it away.
Yes. Thank you, Chairman. This year for the fiscal 24 budget, we have for revenue increases, we are projecting a $1,916,818 increase to revenue. We are expecting an increase to expenses overall with some different components of $911,478.10. Therefore, ending with a little over $1 million. However, that includes that home rule component with the increases to home rule, which we're going to get much more in detail with at the meeting. And if you take that piece out, it ends up with a surplus of $255,340.89. We have some new things happening in this budget, things that I've never gotten to work on before since I've been here in the last 10 years, which is very positive. For the first time, because of the issuance of you all approving those pension obligation bonds, we are able to remove some of the payment to the pension funds directly because we know now that that money is going to go for debt service. So it looks very differently. It's the same mission. We're still doing the same thing, funding our pensions, but when it comes to presentation, it looks differently. We'll talk about that a little bit more. We also, for the first time, will be able to begin setting aside our own self-funded capital, which has been a goal since I've been here, that we would actually be able to do such a thing, and that's going to be to the tune of $2 million this year. Anytime we've done capital in the past, we've had to go to the bond market and request those funds, and obviously we pay interest on those funds. There's a cost of issuance. It's a very costly situation. We may have to do that still someday. I'm not saying that we'll be able to build up enough where we can possibly self-fund ourselves forever, but most financially stable cities don't usually go to the bond market for their capital needs unless it's a massive project, of course. So I'm excited that that's a component of this year's budget. So we'll go over the details later, but overall, it's a very solid budget. It's very financially sound, and of course, if there's any questions, I can take those now, or we can talk about them in detail during the meeting. I plan to. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. So are there any public comments regarding the budget as it stands in this proposal now, or the comments that Comptroller Kubel made, or anything else? Our audience is very young tonight, which is great to see. Seeing none, we will close public comment. Is there a motion to close public comment? Moved. Is there a second motion and a second? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. The public hearing, the public comment section is closed, and we will close the public hearing on the budget. We'll also have a public hearing on the budget a week from tonight in advance of the city council meeting as well, so there'll be 2 public hearings total. Okay, on to the budget committee meeting. Public comments. Are there any public comments? Seeing none, we will proceed with the roll call. Alderwoman Malone Marshall. Present. Alderman O'Brien here. Alderman Osinga. Present. Alderman Marzak.
Present.
Alderman Navarez. Alderwoman Johnson.
Here.
And Alderman Jones.
Present.
Okay, we do have a quorum. We don't have presentations or old business tonight. We have 2 items under new business. The first is the budget. Comptroller Kubel gave us a big picture perspective on that now, but now's the opportunity for more detail. So Comptroller Kubel, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Okay, great. So tonight you have some different documents in front of you, but we're still going to continue to focus on the executive summary that we've always looked at. What I really just need you to know, though, as we go through these items and we talk about different items, is at the bottom of each section, you'll see where it says total revenue increases to budget and total expense changes to budget. In your supporting documents, where we go line by line, the other two documents in front of you, those totals on these documents tie to these totals. So I like to look at the one in summary more, because I mean, $150 change of budget isn't as meaningful as us looking at the trends, what we've seen, and where we think we're going to be going during this next year. So you certainly have this for your review. This is what will be presented next week. If you have any questions on the detail of this over the next week, please call my office. I'd be happy to sit down with you. I know that Mayor Curtis would be happy to sit down with you as well. And we will go into any details as you, as being council members, have any questions. I'm happy to go over those. But right now, all the details, I think, in the big picture of the budget we can go over is on the executive summary. Okay? So on the executive summary, last month we had numbers, and I told you when we met, I said, I think this number is a solid number. I think this one needs more research. We've had lots of conversations like that. And basically, with this one now, all those items have been accomplished. All the research has been done. All of the analysis is over, and now this is the budget that we're presenting. So when I went back and looked at some things compared to last time in the revenue section, starting with number 1, the property taxes I had included were just the general property taxes and the road and bridge tax. I did not take into consideration the pension pieces of property taxes because of the fact it's a little daunting this year with the change of everything, with us asking for far less because of the situation with the POB bond. And I really had to talk with the auditors, with the mayor, and really had to do some thinking about how we were going to present everything this year. So after I did that, I thought, nope, you got to have everything on this piece of paper. So that number is less, not because we are getting less money than last time when we met a month ago. It's because I've included all 4 components inside of that number. And that would be, of course, the general property taxes, the road and bridge taxes, and then the police and the fire pension taxes. Those are our 4 property tax categories. Okay? That's why that number is now 226. And if it's shaded, that means it's had a change from the last time we sat down together. So that's important to me for you to know that if it's a shaded box on here or a shaded line, that means that it's a different number, just for tracking purposes. The next one is the increase to personal property replacement tax. We took that down $200,000 from last time. The main reason being is that the IML publication came out shortly after we all were together the last time, and I went through that. The entire municipal sharing section this time was almost all about personal property replacement tax, so it was perfectly timed for us. I researched that, I highlighted it, the mayor read it, I read it again to make sure I understood what they were saying. And in a nutshell, they were saying that due to different causes, a part of it being state-led, a part of it being economy-led, a part of it being that they didn't understand why it was up to begin with, which it actually said in fancy words, they said to expect a 35% decrease over this next year. Now, we had budgeted somewhere, and I have all these documents here, but I'm going to go off of my mind. Somewhere we budgeted last year $1.17 million or something like that. And we brought in a much, much larger number than that, as you recall. So it was still proper to make an adjustment because we had to take 35% off of that top number, not what we budgeted last year, because we were well under budget, not knowing that circumstance. So I took 35% off of what we actually collected last year and then came off of that number. That still leaves a $375,000 increase, but yet matches what the state told us to prepare for. So there is a change there, but that is the rationale for that change. Increase the sales tax. This number was here, and it had an increase before. I think before it was possibly just $75,000. But remember, at the very bottom, it's now number 20 at the bottom. It says new developments, additional revenue across categories now. We had a number that said 600,000 there. We thought that number last time was a little bit high after our analysis. We backed it down to 475. And now that 475 has been allocated out amongst sales tax, home rule sales tax, and cannabis excise tax for the categories that we believe through the new developments that we will be receiving additional revenues this next year. So that's why I made that note there that it is a little bit of a different glance to that number. Same situation for the home rule. That changes solely because the new development dollars have been added to that line now. As we go into, when we go into this document, as you well know, I have to have exactly what's going to go on each line so that I can get this prepared for our meeting. So I have to have that broken down per line and not just in generalities any longer. Income tax stayed the same. The increase to the cannabis excise tax is that reason I just stated, due to new development and what we think is going to come in there with the new development out by Ricky Rockets. And as you can see, the rest of these items, until we get to the very last one on 21, are identically the same as we talked about last year. I did look at almost all of these again, just to make sure that the numbers were solid and that we were thinking of everything, and everything still kept it together from where we were. I knew I had worked really, really hard on revenues, because if you don't have a good revenue number to start off with for your budget, you can't very well do expenses. So I knew revenues I'd worked a little bit harder on than expenses the last time. So I wasn't surprised about this, but I wanted to let you all know that those are still solid. I did take on line 20, I should have that shaded technically because I did remove that money, but reallocated it as we just spoke of. And then on 21, we did add a decrease to ARPA reimbursement. Last year we had $800 and something like $50,000, and we still have those programs and those items in the budget, but we're not going to be pulling upon so much of that this year. We still, of course, have our fire program, our workforce program with fire. We still have our community outreach folks, over in Barbie's department. We still have, of course, as we're going to be getting into that Office of Violence Prevention. But the rest of it and other pieces of it, those are about our last three pieces that are still in the general fund budget for reimbursement. So we want to make sure we accounted for that properly. So therefore, revenues, the increase to budget then is that $1,916,808.99. Alderman?
Elizabeth, under number 8, increase the utility tax due to trend data. Why would the tax go down that much?
They just didn't. They did not hit our expectations last year, and they actually were shy. I think going back 3 years when I looked, it was 2 for sure, but I think it was 3. But it was a slightly down the last 2 years where we kind of kept thinking, well, prices are going up, we'll leave it up. This is what the world's doing. It doesn't seem to be doing that though. So I felt like it was appropriate to make an adjustment this year because the last few years we haven't made one. I wish I could give you more explanation on that. I really can't. It has to be some type of a trending pattern across our area. Possibly weather related, I'm assuming.
Solar panels on everybody's roof.
Yeah, could be solar, could be weather. I mean, all of it. I think there's, because it really was slightly decreasing until this last year when I thought we can't ignore that. We can't put a number in there that we haven't hit in 3 years. That's not responsible. But you both could be very right about that.
Comptroller Cool, there's no change from from the past version, but the ambulance fee number, that's a big increase. You're comfortable with that?
We did. We looked at that number again. I know the chief and the mayor had at least 1 or 2 conversations about it. Chief and I talked about it again today. We do feel that that's a solid number for several different reasons. Chief, do you want to speak into this since you've been the one who's done the most work with it?
Sure. So we have reassess our cost analysis of who we work with the state for our youth facility. Having additional expenses that we will promote, which will increase our cost enforcement and also increase our rate of Medicaid and Medicare with our increase in fees, so we should be able to increase with our cost expense. Now, that means that we are seeing increasing of calls. What we had our last few years, we see that number.
And the cost report, that's the cost that we incur and then charge for.
Salaries, people, appreciation of vehicles, supplies, didn't account for the last few years our communications. So dispatch fees,
chief has worked really hard and been in good communication with my office to work out what are truly more fire centralized expenses. So we, as many of you know, because you've been to many, many meetings, a lot of those central costs are included in the comptroller's office. And is it perfectly accurate? Of course not. You know, we don't have every phone in the city. We don't have every cell phone in the city. But when you start to break those bills out, it is cumbersome, as you can imagine. You know, you've got a bill that's this thick that has to be split up, 15, 17, 18 different ways. It's quite cumbersome. So there's a lot of communities that just keep that as centralized cost. That's what they call it. I'm an overhead department. I always will be. And they just keep those costs there. In the future, as things go on and we become more sophisticated and able to use software a little bit more, we might be able to look at that. The chief challenged us this year and said, hey, without these costs being in my department, this is hurting the city. This is not a true picture of who we are. It's like 85% of who we are, basically. That's not exactly what he said. I'm kind of using some liberty there. But basically, it wasn't the whole picture of who the fire department is. And that is what we are challenged to do on the cost report, is put the full picture of the fire department. So as he alluded to, we did move 35% after his talking with CANCOM. 35% of what we usually pay out of that police line, that cost, 35% of it is now a fire line within the fire department. And we're moving around some of those other communication pieces too, just to give that true picture of what the fire department has as their expenditures. And we try to work with our department heads when they have special requests that make sense to me, and there's a good rationale why. Of course, I don't want to be the one who says, well, nope, we've always done it like that. It doesn't make sense in this situation. It was a really good challenge, and we made those changes.
Since we're on the fire, how are we looking at funding the new ladder truck?
There's some different components. That's capital. So a lot of that piece is not within this budget, but we plan on putting together, after this month, after I get out of budget and ARP and audit, we plan on putting together some documents outlining that, because a lot of us have those numbers floating in our heads right now. And I know some of them I'm not even 100% sure of anymore. We've had so many conversations. So I feel like if I don't have it solid in my head, Mayor and I both discussed that we need to get that on paper, and we need to share those documents, because we just have so many great projects. This is not just the truck. Multiple projects across the city, where it's like, well, wait a minute, we sit in these meetings and go, wait, did we say we're doing MFT with that? Are we doing this with that? And we find ourselves in that conversation a lot lately. So we felt like to do a project update document is kind of what we called it, down here in that August, September timeframe, so we can lay that out to you all. So you can say, oh, yes, I do remember. That was 60% this or 40% that, I appreciate you saying that, because it is on our radar. It's just not accomplished yet.
But, we're 3 years out, right, for payment?
Right now, it's
4.
you have that,
Right. Sure.
This will be a journey. Just the timeline's a journey. It's so long to get these types of trucks, as you all know, and then us trying to figure out, all the pieces, that we've worked out and everything. And I think too, we're going to come up against an inflationary increase too, which of course is going to happen. We know that. But we will get that all laid out for everybody, because we too have kind of had conversations with some department heads and with the mayor, where I'm like, did we say this? It's like, those need to be cemented in our minds, what the decisions were.
It's a little easier over 4 years, though. So.
Yes.
Than next year.
Yes. Any other questions on revenues before we go into expenses? Revenues were still pretty basic. Expenses gets a little interesting as we have some changes there, so we can move into that now if everyone's ready. As you know, the last time, I'm going to pull out an old document from last month just so that I can speak intelligently about this. So last time when we got together, like I just stated to you all, I had worked on expenses most definitely, but I did not have it down to the penny yet. Revenues I felt pretty good about, but expenses I still had a lot of line item back and forth to go, a few department heads to still meet with. So as all that work got done in this last month, we did end up with that amount there for contractual salary increases. That's 2.5 to 2.75% depending on the union and the contract. And then also the other thing that encompasses is if there's any longevity bumps, if there are any educational bumps that are going to happen, if you know someone's moving into the city, all of those different contractual items that will add additional costs into our budget. So all of that falls into this line item. These are existing employees. So that number, instead of $450,000, as presented last time, it is $374,824.49. So that is a little bit of a bigger number than we're used to. It's better than the 450. Once I actually got through all the details and went through all the salary schedules, it is a little bit less than that, but it is still a very solid number for our staff. The next item is joint dispatch. We just talked about that, what we're doing with that. You will find it's number 604. It's always been housed in the police department. You will see now in Department 43 in the Chief's Department. In Fire, you will see that he now has a 604 line item, and that'll have $380,000 and some odd dollars in it. And that amount is his 35% with this increase in his budget now, leaving 65% inside the police budget. So the raise in general, remember there was a math error that I had made the year before, so we corrected that and then we added 4% to the increase for those 4 months. So that number is a solid number, that 68,704.12 is an increased number, but the placement is now in 2 places. We did keep the legal expense increase the same, hoping that the remainder of our litigation trails off. Also knowing we did have some greater expenses last year due to home rule. We had a lot of legal expenses due to home rule. That obviously will not be a factor this year. So we really think we might need a little bit more as we work through some of these developments that are going on, but we really don't think we'll need much more. Additional expense for animal control. Last time we had $12,000 there. We were going to change that. I know many of you were in that committee meeting where it was stated, we're just going to leave it the same this year. We're going to wait until that. So I think about 10 months. I watched part of that meeting, Alderwoman. I think they said, by the time we're doing budget by next season, we should have better grasp on everything. And then if we need to add money there, we can do that. But we're going to leave it the same for this year. So that's what we did. The next one, additional expense for departments. This is literally every single department. If they added $150 or they added $20,000 for some item, this is all encompassed in this line. That is why I want you all to review this before next week. So all the items not salary driven or explicitly listed separately on this list are included line for line on this document for you all to review. So you can see and go through and you can see if, like for instance, perfect example here for the liquor commissioner for office supplies due to inflationary charges, we did raise that $150. Testing costs for police and fire commission, we raised $5,000. Then we decreased legal notices. So all of those increases and decreases and move arounds are all, for any general expense, are all encompassed within that $180,000. I was pretty pleased with that number, I'm going to be honest. I was a little nervous when department heads were getting ready to come into my office to talk about budget, knowing the pressures, inflationary, that we have faced as individuals in the different places we go to. Our department heads are facing those same challenges with their supplies. They all were very cognizant of it. They made the increases where they know that they need to make the increases, but I was also super pleased that a lot of times as they came at me and said, Elizabeth, this particular supply we have, it went up 15%. I have to have that supply, for ambulance or whatever, the department had said. That by the next time we got to another line, but, I think we can do with a little less here on this line item. I think we can take a little bit away from office supplies. And they really tried to balance out any needful increase, just like you kind of would at your house. If the cable bill goes up and that's important, maybe you change your groceries a little bit. It's choices, and I just couldn't have been more pleased. I didn't go back at anybody this year and ask them to remove dollars from their budget when it came to the operational expenses, the supplies and such. They did that on the onset, which was really, really a nice thing. So I just wanted to say I thought that number was going to be a lot higher. I think I had that number $400,000 the last time we met on the last sheet, and you can see we end up at that 180, 158. So I was just super pleased about that. The next line item, that additional expense for new staffing. The last time we had that at $120,000, that came down to $97,455. That includes the code secretary that has been talked about. That is in that line item. We also right now did put about half a person in my department to see if we need some more additional help with grants, administration, and compliance. That decision by no means has been made or brought to any type of conversation. We just wanted to make sure that that money was there in the just in case when we get on the other side of everything with all this audits and ARP and budget to see if that's a piece that we might still possibly need as just a possibility. So those are those two components there. Last time when we met, workers' comp insurance, I said I thought it was going to go up about $250,000. After analysis and speaking with Carolyn and looking at invoices, we actually believe that'll only be about $100,000. Many situations she talked to me about, we have had some that have been longer, but we've had many that have been very short-lived, and that is very helpful when you're talking about your workers' compensation costs. So that's a very good thing. So we put that in for that. Additional expense for liability insurance. This is an estimation. I took this times 7%, having no idea come December what those last 4 months will look like, of course. But we do know the solid cost until December. And so then this adjustment here is solely based off of what possibly those last 4 months of the fiscal year could be. With that, and true that number. Last time I had it at $100,000, but once I actually did the math, it was $105,833. Additional expense for health insurance, same thing. I had $100,000 when we met the last time. When I actually had the big spreadsheet and did all the math, took out all the retirees' payments, took out what the library reimburses us, take out what ECBA reimburses us. When we get all that math done, it actually came out to be $128,157. Many of the new hires that we have hired within police and fire have taken our insurance, which is why we have it. We have that as a benefit here if there's to obviously take. We had several retirees who didn't have full family coverage. So we were losing, in some situations, we lost like an employee plus a spouse on a coverage with a retiree, but then we gained a family type of thing. So it's just an increased cost there, more than I had planned on in the initial numbers. The next number, the additional expense for the Office of Violence Prevention, that number is identically the same. What you will find is that now you have the detail as to what the plan is for that in your packet. You can see how much is for salaries, how much is for office supplies, community outreach, and all of those details are within your package that explicitly states the $150,000. That was the same amount as last time, though. Community promotions, we only had $50,000 the last time we got together. That was to cover increased outreach and fireworks, as you might recall from conversations, and now it's $210,000. The main driver for this is that in conversation with Chairman O'Brien and with the mayor, we are still very much active. I'm sure some of you have been talking about possibly what does that next step with census look like, right? We know we don't need it for home rule. That victory has been won. But with the state allocation formulas on how they give us money with MST, with some of the other ones that fall into the local government categories, your population matters, and it matters big time. You don't get as much if you don't report as many people. So it is very important to us that we possibly make an investment, and possibly as you all decided to be, we definitely wanted it to be a possibility in the budget that we had those resources available financially so that that type of task could be taken on if need be. And we did put in $170,000 for that. It is our understanding that Bourbonnais 10 years ago when they did it, spent somewhere in that $70,000 to $80,000 category. We believe with costs that have obviously gone up in 10 years, plus being a larger community, we believe that it could be at least that amount of money, but we felt like it was a good starting point to have that official recount per se done. So that is a major change that I just wanted to share with everybody here tonight. The next line item, that additional expense for retirement buyouts, those are technically included within the salary line items. So each department head, chief, and the chief from police department, they come in my office and say, Elizabeth, it is our understanding that we have 3 employees who are looking to retire this year. Their approximate buyouts would be X amount of dollars. I would like to add that into the budget. Very responsible. We had years early on when I first started here where we kind of went like this and prayed nobody retired because we really didn't have the extra money to pay it out, and we didn't know exactly how we were going to figure it out if they did. Now, the department has come to me with their number and say, I've got employee 1, 2, and 3, and it's going to be, 30, 20, and 20, and that's the number I need to add into my budget. So whatever those numbers are, so those are all around that $250,000 number and included within the salary lines where that person would retire from. The additional expense for sales tax reimbursements, I had $100,000 there because I thought with inflation that was necessary. If not, I was actually able to remove that after careful analysis of that situation. Now, 14, 15, and 16 are brand new from last time. And these are those major changes I alluded to in the public hearing. So I'm going to try to explain this because I've had to kind of get my head around it a little bit. As you recall, last year when we looked at financials, we had budgets of pensions somewhere in that range of, I'm going to say 4.5 million to 4.7 million per pension fund. So if you looked at the budget, it said 4.5 million, 4.7 million. Of that, remember, we had two components. We had the property taxes that we levied, that was going to be part of it that we send to the pension funds back in the day. And then we also had the other component, which was last year it was 2.55 million for each fund. It was a total of 5.1 million that we had from the 2% sales tax. And we added those two numbers, property tax and the 2% at that 2.55 million. And we added those together and we came up with those numbers. That was fine. That worked just fine. And then we did POBs, which has completely changed the structure of how we look at this now. Is it still the pensions money, the 2%? Absolutely. But remember, when we modified that ordinance, we said the first commitment is actually to pay off the bond. Because of all commitments here at the city, bond commitments hold the highest value. They get done first. So in that spirit, in looking with the budget and multiple conversations with the mayor, I've talked to the auditors now about it twice, just to make sure that we're thinking clearly about this. I technically have to reduce the pension expense by whatever the change is. Mostly it's at 5.1 million. But basically from whatever we just did for property taxes needs to be changed, or what we did for sales tax plus the change in property taxes needs to be on here. So that is the change. So the only thing left in your detail here is the amounts that we know we're getting from the property taxes. I'm going to read those to you. They're at the top of page 1 in your revenue packet. Those amounts are for property taxes. We anticipate bringing in $2,479,136, and we also imagine bringing in with property taxes for fire pension $1,838,073. In this transitional year, as we await to possibly go back to the bond market to finish out the rest of the POBs, we believe that those monies that come through property taxes will still go to the pension funds. We will still send those out as we always have. That piece isn't going to look different. That's why those pieces are still then within the expense packet, because that's what we account for. Revenue comes in from property taxes, we send it back out to the pension fund. That piece is similar. But the 5.1 million now is a new ballgame, because that money that we have promised that is pension money now has to pay bonds. So, that being said, on line 14, the reduction there is not lesser of a commitment to the pension funds. It is a restructuring number that we have to do to make this all make sense with our new commitments. That's what that is. So I just don't want that number to be misinterpreted, that we are, we cut pension funding by 5.3 million. That couldn't be any further from the truth. It's just a complete restructuring because you all chose to do the POBs and give those funds that shot in the arm of funds so that their funding levels can go up, which they did to 50%. Now our levy was less because we don't need as much because we're at a 50% funding level. So we will continue to talk about this as it works out because we are kind of in this in-between place where we're not all in the bond yet with all the bonds we're going to take out, but we're not where we were. We're kind of in this in-between middle space. So we're trying to address that from the restructuring as best as we can. So that's the first piece. Then I'm actually going to skip to 16. I should have put these together. Number 16 is the commitment to debt service that says POBs. We have actually, in your expense statement, in the last page, if you wanted to flip to it right now, that would be great. On page 9, you will see that about halfway down on the page, under interest and transfers, there is a line item now that says 967. It actually says commitment to debt service, $2,516,544.49, just like this sheet says on line 16. When speaking with the auditors, I said, now wait a minute here. All of this 2% money has to be receipted to the general fund, correct? And they said, well, yes, the city council has said we're collecting at 2%, you collect the money from the state. Yes, it has to be receipted in the general fund. I said, okay, that's what we do today, that's what we've done the whole time we've had it. No problem. I said, but this money we're bringing in now is to pay the bonds, and that's a separate fund. So how do we do that? Like, do we put, like, transfer to bonds? Is it a due to? I mean, we had a lot of conversation about this. And after a conversation with the partner and our managing accountant, or auditor, they both said, you know, it's really like a commitment. Like, you all have to pay this money. It's a commitment. So it's a commitment to debt service makes the most sense for the purpose of POBs. So that's what that looks like now. So we actually have it on our income statement. That's exactly the money that's owed this year in interest for the pension obligation bonds. We already paid one of those because we do it on June 1st and we do it on December 1st. So those will actually both be paid this calendar year, this fiscal year. One was 1.1 million and one is like 1.3 something million. So that's how we're accounting for those. Have I lost anybody yet? I had to think about this quite a bit, to be honest with you. Alderman.
I do have a question, and I don't know if you can answer this question. We talked about it before. I know we're going out with bonding to make the pensions whole.
Yes.
And I think the number was close to 100 million.
It was.
By doing that, we know over 15, 20, 30-year payout, how much money the city is going to save.
We
Is
do.
there
That sheet was given at the very end of the bonding last year. So let me make actually a note about that. We will be in these August and September months as we get through the rest of this month, along with this project thing. The other situation we want to do is revisit pensions. I know I talked to Chairman O'Brien about it, because now we will be in a position now where, although the market, of course, is not working in our favor, as we well know, we do need to revisit this. And we said we would revisit this once the audit was completed, and I've got an update on that here shortly. So we will, and we won't just be revisiting that on the administration, we will be revisiting that. All of us will be revisiting that and going back to that. So I will make sure that that sheet is included again. It's kind of a complex sheet, but it answers your question though. It tells when those points of, you know, how does this stay? What will the cost decrease to? Because once everything starts getting paid to the bonds, right, it's a whole different ballgame. You know, everything looks a little bit differently. It's kind of a multi-prong approach, I guess, is the best way to talk about it. But we will revisit that, most definitely.
I've had some conversations with people, and I told them that we're going to bond to make the whole, it's about $100 million. And I said, it's going to save us money in the long run. I would like to have a approximate number.
Absolutely.
This is what we're going to save by doing what
Yeah.
seems crazy, but this is
For sure. Now, obviously, with interest rates creeping up, that number has shrunk. But in the long term, that number really shrinks kind of in the short term. In the long term, we still have substantial savings to the taxpayers of the city of Kankakee.
okay.
Substantial. Plus, in the meantime, what we saw instantly, which I think we talked about when we had levy last season, it was so interesting to me that in a month, after we closed on those bonds, you know, in November, you know, right before the election, I think it was early November, the actuaries were working on the levy reports, right? And so they included the fact that we had already taken that money out because they can do that on the actuarial level. So they did. They included that. This is the money. You know, City of Kankakee took this out for the pensions. And that was when I was looking at the numbers. I'm like, we don't have to levy as much. You know, and we've always had the secondary piece of the 2% in the last few years. But we didn't have to levy as much because instantly that shot in the arm took those pensions to 50% almost overnight. And then at that 50% level, it changes all of those actuarial formulas that tell you how much you need to put in. all of that changes, and it makes common sense. You have more money, you don't need as much money. I mean, it does make common sense. It's far more complex than that, but it does make sense when you think about it. And I knew it would, but it was even surprising to me that in that month's time to get that new report and be like, oh, wow, yeah, that really did change things already, So it's interesting. This is just the beginning of our conversations about this, as we're in the middle of this, like I said, in the middle world right now, because I even at pension meetings, I get asked the question, well, like, Elizabeth, how much money are we still going to get since you don't have to commit all that to bonds? And I said, well, that's a great question. I said, because that needs more analysis. I can't say that we're going to be bonding in the future and not properly have a reserve set up for that in case there's a year where maybe 2% is not as strong. You all committed to a reserve once we did the POB closing. We already have that initial $2 million, but $2 million with these big payments that we suspect will happen in the future once we close on all the bonds, $2 million is nothing. When you're looking at that, we need bigger reserves than that. And so we have to hold that money a little differently. And the pension funds have been very understanding and understand it's for them. It's not our money. It would be held in a separate escrow. And that's another calculation that's on the horizon right now of what is that number even. Most definitely. All right, so everybody still with me on pension? Good. Number 15 then is we have labeled it as capital expenses allocation from the general fund to capital. As you all know, and this is a very familiar concept actually, in the ESU we've done this for years, right? We have a number in there. We say that ESU needs $600,000 of capital or $800,000 of capital. We put that in there as a placeholder, and then we self-fund our capital in the ESU. We are now finally, for the first time since I've worked here, in a position where we can kind of start this for the general fund. We still have capital money from the 2020 bonding that we did. Many of you were here for that. We still have some dollars with that for sure. But we have been doing some really great work across the city through the committees you all are on. And that money is dwindling. It is dwindling. Another item on the list of the update for capital needs to get done as well. And so we know that money will eventually deplete. Not this next year, but it's going to deplete. And we're not going to go back to the bond market for anything but POBs. We've made that declaration already. And so now it's time for us to do what we've done with ESU. It's time for us to be responsible with those tax dollars and start funding our own capital and our own long-term needs so that we don't have to go to a bank. It's just like your house, right? I mean, you can go to the bank and get a little loan for your roof if you need it, and they'll give you the money if you're qualified. It sure costs a lot more than if you could just write the check and say, hey, I need my work done. So it's the same exact concept. That's exactly what we're doing with this. And I'm excited that I hope it's $2 million. Obviously, if revenues don't come in the right way, that'll be the first place that we probably won't fund, right? Because it's internal. But I really think after really studying this budget, that $2 million could really happen. And we could do that in the first year, which would be excellent. And set us up for some really long-term success financially. So when that's all said and done, it comes out to that $911,478.10 of additional expenses, leaving that, like we talked about in the hearing, $1,005,340.89. Seems like a huge surplus, but it is critical to remember that you have to back off the home rule because that is not city general fund money that we can touch. It's earmarked. So it takes you down to that $255,340.89. So hopefully the word scant, surplus won't get used this year. It's been a goal of mine for a long time not to read that word in the paper. We shall see how that is interpreted, but that is the number that we have for your presentation next Monday night for passage.
So that's the detailed version of the summary. Does anyone have questions for Councilor Kubel? Thank you for the detailed description there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a few questions. So under our legal expenses, is that just for our corporate law firm, or is that, because I know we hired Dawn.
Correct.
And the legal fund, or legal money used to come out of ESU when we had a contract.
And we haven't done that in 2 years now. So ESU has not given, except for Mary Lou's salary, it's not
Yes,
ESU.
yes.
Dawn has fully been in the general fund since she started.
Okay, so she
So-
comes out of this budget?
Yeah, so we
not-
only had a partial salary in there last year, which made sense because we knew it would be, we might have some legal things that need to be done. So we put a partial in. She is in here as of course, a full year employee now. That
Okay.
differential is here, but that's not the 50,000. The 50,000 is for our attorneys that we have to hire for different types of cases. So it's not just Fajan Taylor though. We have a couple of different things that get paid out of there. Sometimes we use Robin Schwartz if it's TIF matters. Not really TIF matters, that's the wrong word. PTAB matters is the right word. So if we have anything that we do, we share a lot of those expenses with the school district. We'll go like 51%, 49% with them. As we fight those, as we have businesses, of course, that want to reduce their property taxes and say that their properties are worth substantially less. And if they're right, they get granted that. And if they're wrong, and we think they're wrong, we fight them. Because it's not okay on a corporate level to say your property is worth dollars and dollars, that it's worth thousands and thousands of dollars. So we fight that, and we have, Robbins and Swartz has done that work for us off and on for probably 15 to 20 years. They're very well versed in that here at the city of Kankakee, and we've kept them on to that. So anytime if we ever need to hire another special attorney for something, if there was some other special thing that happened, this is the category we pay them. But the large cost in that category, you are correct, is Fajan Taylor, our corporate counsel.
And then I think it was on line 6, the additional expense for new potential staffing.
Yes.
Did you say we're getting a new secretary?
Yes, over in the code department.
Oh, okay.
They've done, Alder women, it's a restructuring per se, correct?
Yes, it's a restructuring. We're going to be less one code inspector, property inspector,
Okay.
and there will be a secretary.
Thank you.
That's easy. Alderman?
Thank you, Control. The additional expense for the line 10 for the violence, Office of Violence Prevention, how was that going to break down? Can you?
Absolutely, let's turn to it right now. So on page, it's gonna be housed under the Police Department, Department 37. You go to page 5 in your expense packet,
Okay.
and then flip it to page 6.
Okay, good.
I didn't go far enough. Actually, page 6, let's try again.
Okay.
The top of the page, it says school crossing guards, and then underneath it, it says Office of Violence Prevention.
Okay.
And you can see the breakdown there of salaries, office supplies, training conferences, events, promotions, outreach, and equipment maintenance repairs, which is mostly a copy machine. That's our best guess with the mayor and his conversations with Johnny Wicks Graham, is that we can get this breakdown and get this office a little bit more further down the road than it is. I believe right now we have a job posting for this, I believe, for an additional person there besides Johnny.
Okay. So the salary is going to be roughly about 110,000
That's for 2 people.
for 2 people.
Yeah, that's for 2
Okay,
people,
so,
yeah.
all right. In the events and promotion piece, do they have to spend, because I was hearing some that, do they have to spend money out their pocket for the outreach for the community in terms of, doing events, or do we handle all of that in the city?
We handle all of that.
Okay.
There's been a little bit of a credit card issue where sometimes it wasn't issued right away to her, but that's in the mail now. So but she's always been able to use the mayor's credit card for anything like that. If it's one of those events, or obviously our choice is always to get invoiced if at all possible.
Okay.
But a lot of times when you are doing events, Dollar General is not going to invoice you. When you're out getting Halloween candy, Costco is not going to invoice you, things like that. So I'm cognizant of that within that department, that their credit card usage there is a little bit than other departments, and it's because of the nature of what they do.
And one more thing, Mayor, it was brought up last time about doing things for the aldermen. Was that even brought up?
Absolutely.
How do we
Yep, we took
address?
notes on that most definitely. If you go back to the first page, which is page 3 of the expense packet,
Yes.
and if you go down to 562 on that very first section, it says community outreach support.
Okay.
There is $7,000 budgeted, which would be $1,000 per ward, to start this and trying to listen to what aldermen were saying,
Okay.
as current needs. You see it, Alderman?
On which page? Okay, 562, I
And
got
then
it.
you can see $7,000 right there, 1,000 per ward.
Okay, oh, okay.
So that's just a starting point. We need to come up with a process now of how we're going to work with that.
Gotcha.
Obviously, it's not like one check will get cut or anything like that.
Right.
It would be a reimbursement, and we'll need to probably sit with aldermen and talk about, what that looks like, how you turn in a receipt, what are the proper things that can be spent for, and things of that sort. So we'll have to do probably a budget here shortly. We'll do a little workshop on that, 5 minutes or something.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
no,
thank you.
definitely. I always get nervous, you get to the end and you're instantly, Chief and I today, I called him on something. He said, Elizabeth, what about this piece? And I was like, oh, Chief, I don't see it. There's always something that doesn't get done. So it's just, I'm so glad you asked because I need reminders too, because there's a lot of moving parts when we do these budgets. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the budget as presented? Thank you, Comptroller Kubel. I imagine we'll go through a similar overview at the city council meeting a week from tonight, right? Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks for the good questions, everyone. Next, under new business is the review of the city financial statements.
Alderman, or Chairman, I looked at that today briefly. We actually still have several more entries than I thought we still had to put into that. So I decided to wait one more month for that. So you'll get a fiscal 24 financial statement finally next month of this year, because we'll have a past budget and where we're at this year. And then you're going to get my best stab at what is final for fiscal 23, and you'll get those together next month. I think it'll be more meaningful. The number didn't change enough for me to think it was meaningful to print out documents tonight.
Okay,
But we're still waiting on that taxes. That should post this week.
makes sense. All right, thank you. On to mayor updates. There's 3 items there. Would those be yours to report
Those
on?
are mine. I didn't get
Okay.
changed, did it? Because he's not here. It should say comptroller updates. I apologize. The first one is very exciting. Last Thursday, I was, and we've been working really hard, and I've been telling you all that, but I don't know, my dad always said, he always would joke and be like, kind of show me what you're doing. Don't just talk about it. So Thursday, I was working with my staff across the hall, and Carlos, our auditor, walked in, and he had an envelope. I didn't bring it with me, but it was similar to this, about this big. And I looked at him. I had no idea he was coming. He had actually texted me, but I was in your office, so I didn't know. And I said, that's usually the envelope you bring the audit in, Carlos. And he said, and it is today too. So as final as they can get it, which is they are very particular with their drafts. Their drafts are final, basically. We very seldom want to do any work after that. I have a draft audit with a very tight time frame of Wednesday that MD&A and the stat schedules need to be done for fiscal 22. So the reason being they've got to put some other components together, and they've got some scheduled time off the end of July amongst some members of their staff, so that then they can come back in on August and start the 23 audit, and we will be back on track. I'm probably the most excited person right now about this. So I am so happy. The audit looks great. I can't wait to show it to you all. We've got some pieces we are still doing with it, but it was really a great year. 22 was. And it shows in the financials. And if S&P calls tomorrow, bring it on. Let's go. I'm ready to talk to them again. I think we have a lot of very strong positives. I'm optimistic. I don't want to say more than that. I'm optimistic that when we go back to them, that it is a new day. So I'm excited for that.
Do you have an idea of what the timing would be for presentation of the audit at the council meeting or the budget committee?
I haven't gotten that far yet, other than it certainly won't be July. And it may, depending on the auditor schedules, I don't know if it would be August for sure. I don't want to rule that out yet. September at the latest. So September at the latest, possibly August would be what I would say tonight, for sure.
Great.
So that's that update. I don't have any general updates right now. And then with ARPA, just reminding everybody that, of course, this is an ARPA meeting month, I believe, correct? We meet the
I
last
believe
Monday.
so, yes.
And also in that spirit, it works out kind of well when we meet after the quarter ends, because right now my office is doing the work of getting all the detailed expenditures together with ARPA, because we have another quarterly report due. And we had quite a bit of activity in the second quarter. So we'll have quite a bit to report. This will So I met with Carlos briefly about the 22 audit, but it's pretty much done. We actually then met for an hour about the 23 audit. The ARP and the compliance with the ARP it's daunting. It's just flat daunting what the federal government's asking for. Because as we know, so much money was given out. Now there's been time to kind of figure out, whoa, how are we going to monitor all this? I feel really good about the way we've done it. I feel confident about it. That's not my worry. But OMB has come out with some compliance regulations that are extremely strict. And the auditors, I mean, they're like, this is what this paperwork has to look like. Now, when Carlos, I pulled a quarterly report, and I said, well, this is what I report to the government. Like, and he was pleased. He said, oh, okay, this is good. It's got detail. He was pleased with that. And I was, kind of like secretly going, oh, good, that's good. And that's still not going to be enough. We have to go back through and make sure there's proper signatures on every invoice. And I said, but the council, the way we structure it, the council approves the allocation. So nothing could ever, every check that goes out has that allocation number written on it. If it was for MIRA, if it was for whatever program of ARP, it has that number on it. And so I thought that was a good place, a good cross-reference. That's why we did it like that. And he said, that is very, very good. He said, but it just still requires additional layers of basically compliance. So it's just going to be, and nothing we've done is wrong. Everything we've done is good, but it kind of has to go from good to great. So we are going to have some work cut out for us on that, but we will get it done. We will figure that out. The other component that won't really affect time-wise in my office, but the way that everything's going to look so differently on a financial statement after we put the POBs on the balance sheet. So that's going to be a lot of work for them more than us. We have those numbers. We know what happened. They're going to have a lot of changes that they're going to have to track and triple check because numbers that used to be this big are only going to be this big now, and things like that. So those two components will be new to this audit, things that we've never really done before. We've obviously bonded many, many times. We've not bonded in this way, and we've also certainly never had ARP to report on like this because remember in fiscal 22, we did give ourselves some money that was legal under the ARP law, but that was for revenue replacement and for sewer projects. And we kept all that money that we allocated that year here at the city. Well, different regulations then. Then when we send it to somebody else, we have to have all of their TIN numbers and all that data, which has been collected. We've done all of that, but it sounds like getting it more centrally located for the auditor will be where the challenge comes into play. So I just wanted to bring everybody up to speed on that. That when we have a meeting and two, we have a report due at the end of this month. That's all I have.
Any questions for Councilor Kubal on that or anything else? Also, the ARPA, we have a July meeting, that's what you meant?
Yes,
right? Yeah.
so it's the 24th, is that the date?
Fourth Monday, I believe, which is,
Yes, yeah, 24, oh yeah, there are 5 Mondays, that's right. It's the 24th, at, I believe 5:30 like we usually do.
yeah, I believe you're right. Okay. Any other questions in general? No? Is there a motion to adjourn?
I did have something, a concern that I just want to mention, and that is the fact that I'm still in dust on Hobby, and every meeting I have requested some assistance over there to get that gravel covered, and I'm still being covered with dust over in the 800 block of North Hobby. And I just want to make sure that everyone is aware that I'm going to continue to do what I'm supposed to do, but I'm very unhappy with how I'm being treated over there. That's it.
Any other comments or questions? Not, is there a motion to adjourn? By Alderman Osinga, is there a
I'll
second?
second.
Second by Alderman Marzak. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you, everyone.